Hello and welcome to the new AFC West Wild Wild West podcast show. That was one heck of a new intro for the second.
The dog doesn't approve.
We're everywhere, yeah.
My dog Bronco, just to be clear, named after obviously the Denver Broncos, clearly does not enjoy the.
What?
I know
a dog named after a football team? Come on, that's so crazy.
A dog named after a horse.
I'm nothing but original. What can I say? So, anyways, guys, we are here to bring you a really, really special show. We have paired each of your favorite AFC West podcasters here with another AFC West podcaster from other podcasts to bring you a rather unique breakdown of each of our rosters. I'm going to go ahead and start with at least the one that I happen to know best, and that is Cameron Parker from the MHRT Network, who will be joining me shortly to break down the Broncos roster, our holes heading into the 2023 draft. You can catch Cameron after our show is over, not before, but after our show is over, where you can join him on the Mainly Broncos podcast. Here we go. Cameron, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic.
You big dummy.
Oh, wrong one.
Hey!
You need that Cat Williams.
And just to be clear, the soundboard is being run by the Chargers fan. So you can go ahead, and that was Coach. You can go ahead and player later in the podcast.
Freudian slip.
I'll give you the. I'll give you and it's not the original, and it's not Red Fox, but it is you big dummy. So there you go. You even get an impersonation.
We get the pirate version of that.
Yeah. I was gonna say to bring things full circle, that was almost like the South Park version of Rabbits Eat Lettuce, except the football edition. We're gonna go ahead and bring forward our one and only Chargers fan, Senior.
Yeah, there is only one and only.
Well, we have at least two on the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, two.
We got three, really. DZ is a regular here. We got to count him.
True.
This is Senior Snappy of the Rivers Lake Yacht Club. Senior, thank you for joining us today. You're going to be working with Coach to educate the rest of the AFC West on what you believe your roster holes are, and we can go from there. I'm going to go ahead and throw over to Arrowhead Tom, who's going to join Alex to talk about the Super Bowl champions.
The undisputed.
Sure, we can go with that.
Champions.
Arrowhead Tom, thank you for joining us.
Is it early to come over and show my ass already?
It's a smug party, baby.
Oh, Jesus.
We don't expect anything less from Raiders fans, so go ahead.
Tell him, Tom. Tell him, Tom.
We're already for it.
I did put shorts on because otherwise it would have been blatant underwear, baby. I'm
You gotta let
just
the
saying.
boys breathe, dude. You gotta let them breathe. I get it.
Remember you said that. Remember you said that.
I didn't say I needed
Exactly.
I didn't say that.
Exactly. We don't need
Does it mean
visuals.
that you guys are going to start talking tight ends already? We're talking about drafts.
Cap gets
I don't know how tight it is, and I don't care.
We cover tight ends, loose ends, all the ends.
Yeah.
And last but not least,
I
we're
don't
going to
wanna
bring
know how
in
tight or loose
Tom
it is.
Jones, otherwise known as T3, to join Captain Jack. Hopefully he will be using his mouth to speak for the remainder of the show about the Raiders draft class. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, guys. Great to be with you. Hey, and Captain Jack was just introducing you all to the dark side.
Listen, I'll stay a Jedi. I don't need to. I need to see that.
He's tried to sway us there multiple times. I think through the show.
So, with that in mind, this is probably one of the larger groups that I've ever seen on a podcast. I mean, the fact that we have an AFC West roundtable and are still speaking to each other after a full year is really a minor miracle in and of itself. Add on to the fact we've now added another 4 of opposing teams, and this is seriously tempting fate.
Yeah, this isn't going to get hostile at all.
We got
not at all. This can be great. Yeah, this can be great. So I figure we'll kick things off with the Raiders and with with T3 and Captain Jack. You guys have had some interesting moves and changes, ebbs and flows this offseason. You've had certainly some interesting elements. Where do you think your roster sits now? And what do you think what are the most likely things that you think are going to occur in the upcoming draft for the Raiders, and particularly for the rest of us, so we can kind of get some insider baseball in terms of what to expect?
Jack, let me let you take the snap, and then when you run with it, when you're ready to lateral it to me, let me know, and I'll take it to the end zone.
Well, then get ready, okay? Because let's put it this way, and this is not smoke up the ass of all the people that are here. Tom, by the way, it's not unusual to have Tom on any time. Like there you go. But
Knew that was coming.
There we go. Yeah.
It's not a show unless he breaks out a song.
Well, either that or flip around for my ass, and I'd rather sing.
One way or the other.
There you go. I would say that Tom Jones is one of the erudite, urbane, and intelligent individuals when it comes to Raider knowledge and history. And so when we were looking for, and Richie said, "Hey, we need another one of you," I said, "Well, there's only one of me, but I do know a guy who knows a lot about the Raiders, and in particular has done some studying about the draft because he does it well. In fact, he gave me a what do you call it when you have a manifesto? There you go. He has a manifesto about the draft that's upcoming, and it's so awesome that I can't even look at it because I feel like it's like going to the Holy Grail of information. So I said, I'm going to get Tom in here, and I'm going to do quickly because the question was, what do we need? And I'm going to ask that one thing before we get into Tom just blowing us away with knowledge. Okay, I'm going to ask the panel again. By the way, the people that are new here don't need to answer this because I've already asked this question 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a row. Okay, when they say, what is the number one Raider need as of right now? I want to hear it in stereo from Coach and Alex and that Bronco.
But didn't
guy.
they do it? I thought they got your boy Hoyer. They don't need a backup QB anymore.
Well, I thought the answer was bail money, so I guess I'm wrong.
It was
I was gonna say a whole defense.
Well, that too.
You're gonna make me turn around real quick, man. You're gonna make me turn around real quick, okay?
Well, I was
Hey, C-Dub's with me, so
I was gonna say from the coach perspective, coming from a Broncos fan, I was gonna say the head coach perspective. You guys need a new head coach, so
need a new owner or manager. He's not even the owner; he's the manager of the team. The new manager.
right.
I'm happy to let Josh McDaniels coach any AFC West team that's not Kansas City. Just pass them around. Los Angeles, you're next.
he can go to the Chargers next. Yeah. There we go.
I would say that it still is. To my knowledge, and you blew the whole stereo thing. You suck. You suck. I wanted to hear it all in one motion, but no, you couldn't even do that for me. Okay, it was still backup quarterback. But because you suck, and especially Mr. Smug himself. By the way, it's a smug fest as well. I'm going to go on with some of my knowledge. It's still that, and Tom's going to go into that. We are still light on a backup quarterback, even though we probably have one of the better backup quarterbacks after the departure of what would have been a really good backup quarterback, which was Jarrett Stidham, who went to the Broncos on a $10 million. I want everything you know about the playbook, and here's about 100 reams of paper and start writing, because that's all they really did with getting Stidham to sign with the Broncos was the knowledge of what is in McDaniels' playbook. Okay, and by the way, Cameron, I know that you're thinking that it's a big pile of crap, but but it's not. It actually has good knowledge. Okay. but I'm setting you up for these softballs as well. It's still backup quarterback, but the reason why they signed Stidham was to get the playbook. Hoyer is probably one of the best plug and play, other than what's his nose that used to play for the Dolphins, that played for, I don't remember who the hell he played for last year, Fitzpatrick. He played for like a couple different teams.
Played for Amazon.
Right.
Okay.
Commentator.
Hoyer is plug and play as far as he knows the playbook. He knows exactly what will be asked of him. He's good for short sprints as far as running into what McDaniels wants. Okay, he was signed. It's a decent thing. He might not even make it to being the backup, and I think Tom might. And I'm not saying he might, but Tom might even allude to that in his stuff. I didn't see that, so I'm setting him up for what is the real thing with Hoyer. Okay. There's one thing the Raiders need as well, and that is an established right tackle. That's still a big question mark. That was a question mark for a bunch of different people until some of the teams actually signed one in the offseason. But we're still got a big question mark there. I would also say the big other question mark that we have amongst us is Josh Jacobs really going to be that guy, or did they just basically tag him to trade him? Because there's a lot of conjecture that Jacobs and Renfro are still not safe, and there might be some draft day shenanigans with involving Josh or involving Hunter Renfro. That's still up in the air. So look for that as a possibility to what's going on. We already got rid of one headache in Darren Waller, and good luck. And we actually got the pick that Kansas City sent to the Giants for Kadarius Toney. So basically, Kansas City gave us our pick via the New York Giants at that number 100. We do need defensive.
So Tom,
I'm sorry, Rich. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just interested to hear Tom's take on at least your first two. You quite literally spoke about two critical positions: the right tackle, someone to protect your new quarterback, and also someone to back up your quarterback when they get hurt after the first game. So I think it's really, really important to have.
That's where the hooker comes in, baby.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the bright side, he will have the showgirls to help him in the hospital room when he's there, because after all, it is porn star Jimmy. But moving on and looking ahead at actually what your roster looks like, I'm very curious at Tom's perspective, at least on those two key positions. I mean,
I'll set up
right tackles in the AFC West now for a year.
All right, putting on my GM hat to the best of my ability, the Raiders did a really good job in last year's draft, not having first or second round picks, and they picked up a really good third rounder in Dylan Parham, who ended up being a starter. He may work into the starting role as a center. Now, when I look at the draft this year, I'm looking at the third round, pick number 70, and I think that Dave Ziegler goes back to the well and gets the best offensive lineman circling in on offensive tackle, who I believe could come in and start. And again, you're developing a good young offensive line. You're developing talent on those rookie contracts, and you're building your organization, which is something that they really didn't get a chance to do last year, minus those two draft picks. Now, as far as Josh Jacobs is concerned, I think Josh will return. I think he'll probably garner anywhere from 13 to 15 million. I think right now the Raiders have had him up on the block, hoping that somebody else will set the market and do all the work. Because again, if some other team picks him up at this point, they'll have to sacrifice 2 first-round draft picks. Don't see that happening. So I see the Raiders re-signing him. I think they'll get a bargain deal because running backs now just aren't making that much. So probably somewhere in the $13, $14 million range. Hunter Renfro, in my opinion, is gone. I love Hunter Renfro. He has established himself since he first came into the league in 2019. But I think that, again, this is not Josh's guy. And I think he's going to go a different direction. I'm not saying that Renfro is not a good receiver. I'm thinking that he will probably go for anywhere for maybe a third round pick, which would be a bump up because we got him as a fifth rounder. So again, you're kind of moving up. You're buying low and selling high. So in my opinion, as much as I'd hate to lose him, I think that is the route that's going to happen. So once again, to address those three things: offensive tackle in the third round, Josh Jacobs stays, Hunter Renfrow gets traded. Would you like me to go further into the draft?
Yeah, who's first round? I just want to know. I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, okay, first round. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the Raiders possibly moving up to the third overall pick and getting a quarterback. I don't see that happening. I don't think that there's anybody on the board other than Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud that the Raiders feel comfortable with rolling the dice on for a third overall pick. And I believe those two guys will be 1-2. Now, if they're not, if let's say Stroud drops to number 3, it's intriguing, but I don't think you make that move. If I'm the GM, I'm not making that move because anybody you draft as a third overall pick is going to be on the clock to get on the field early. And they've committed to Jimmy G. He's their guy. Hoyer's the backup. So who you need to bring in is somebody who's going to be servicing as a backup, hopefully supplanting Hoyer. But my pick, if it were up to me, is to take the best available impact defensive player. If Anderson's there, God forbid, if Anderson should be there, I would run that pick up to the podium in a heartbeat. Jalen Carter, if he's there, same thing. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to come down to either Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon, the two standout corners. That's what the Raiders need to do to start building this team. In the second round, moving back to pick number 38, once again, if Hendon Hooker is there at 38, I don't think he will be, but if he's there, that's where you get your quarterback. But again, if he's not there, I think that the Raiders need to zero in on the linebacker position. And in my opinion, they would have probably their pick of the 3 top linebackers in the draft, which are Drew Sanders, Jack Campbell, or Diane Henley. Now, again, that's just my take. It looks like in the first 2 rounds, the Raiders would pass up on the quarterback. They would go with a cornerback, getting a starter there. And then in the second round, getting a starter in the linebacking core. And I already mentioned that in the third round, you get the best available offensive lineman. So in your top 3 picks, you get a starting corner, you get a starting linebacker, and you get a starting offensive tackle, hopefully. So, again, the Raiders need a lot. They've got their running back. Hopefully, they've got an excellent wide receiver. I think this offense is going to look different because you're going to have somebody pulling the strings who's on the same page as McDaniels, which we didn't have last year. So that's how the first 3 rounds are looking anyway.
So how you like them now?
It's really interesting.
That's way more in depth than Cap. I'll say that. I'm kidding.
Did the homework. Yeah, somebody
Cap did say one time that he was going to be the starting QB for the Raiders. So that's where his plan was at one point.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, they did sign porn star Jimmy to supplant Captain
pretty much
as the starting
same thing.
QB. At least that ahead of the season. I did want to throw over to Senor as a question here. I don't think the Raiders intended to potentially, given that scenario, re-sign Josh Jacobs to we'll call it substantial contract. I think it's rather interesting that the thought process is the Raiders will do that with Jacobs, but there's certainly questions surrounding Eckler. Wanted your take on that scenario and how you juxtapose those two players to see why one might do it and one might not.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me. I was going to say, I think the Chargers would probably trade for Jacobs if you guys want Eckler. I mean, we love Eckler, but the thing is that when we really got to have that yard, Eckler's not the man to do it. And he is excellent with what he does, but there's a lot of question marks about really what to expect from him after this year. And the signs are not looking good for the kind of relationship that's going to go anywhere positive. So I think it's probably time for him to see different pastures, and somebody like Jacobs, I think any team would want if they could afford him.
And just to go one step further on what you're saying, Jacobs is not going to get a long-term deal. If he gets paid, he'll get maximum 2 years. And I think that's all he's expecting. In this current running back market, that's about all you can get on a second contract. I don't think any team is going to go and parlay more than that. Eckler's aging. He's getting a bit of age on him. But the main problem that the Chargers have is they have to save every bit of money they have because a big Herbert deal is coming. And again, that's going to take priority over everything. And that's going to rob the coffers of some other things that the Chargers could possibly address.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I've got a whole laundry list of needs here, but it's not my turn yet. So I'll.
Are there any other?
I like him. He's got manners, unlike the bastard here.
Hey, he's only been here once.
Yeah, don't know you yet. That's the problem.
Point correctly.
We bring him back for another episode. It's not going to be as cordial
exactly.
with you.
He's trying to be cordial because it's his first time. Give him some time. He get comfortable.
I remember my first episode.
He sees your undercarriage a couple of times. It'll be over.
Hey, in my defense, I'm a retired teacher. I used to teach 12 and 13-year-olds. So as unruly as you want to get, I can manage it.
Wrangle it in.
I was actually talking about Senor Snappy, his manners as well, because he has manners. That's why I pointed correctly.
It was a backhanded jab at Coach and myself.
Of course it was.
That's easy. I mean, come on, that's easy. But Tom is very well mannered and very knowledgeable. And again, he does his homework. Okay, and I told you. The reason why I can't do my homework is because I can't get to the friggin' internet, especially recently. And I'll talk to you guys off or via the email as to why. And do a lot of research during the week when the topics come out. That's why I have my ace up the sleeve in Tom Jones, period.
So I got another question for Tom in that case. Tom,
go ahead.
Tom, Mr. Ace in the hole.
No way.
What are you going to do about Tillery? Are you guys going to keep Tillery another year?
I love him.
I love this guy.
Okay. I will tell you this.
I believe.
I will tell you this. Tillery and also Mr. Jenkins, who we brought on, both of those guys are on the roster as of right now. But I think the plan is to have the development of our second-year guys, Matthew Butler and Neil Farrell Jr. Now, if you have those two guys develop, you bring back Bilal Nichols, you bring in a couple of possible stud defenders on that defensive line who are rookies, then Tillery might or might not be secure on the roster. I don't know. Jenkins or Tillery, I could see one, maybe not both making it, but we'll see. If so, they would become depth pieces. I don't think starter material, but Tillery played well when he came in last year for the Raiders, but he also contributed a lot by eating up some of that middle so that some of the other guys on the side could do their work. But I don't know.
The only thing that he ate up for the Chargers was
cookies,
capital. He ate up a lot of money.
And
whatever was in the spread in the locker room, right? The cold.
Whatever was in the cafeteria is what he ate up.
It's kind of funny when you look at defensive tackles across the league, and this is not just a Raiders problem. This is not just a Chargers problem. But when you look at it, there are a lot of players who came in on their initial contracts who did not do well, and then when they changed venues and they went to another team, they were able to get into a good scheme fit and were actually able to do more. I could rattle off 10, 12 different players that happened to that were brought in as either a high or mid-round, first-round pick, didn't do well on their initial teams, but then when they went to another place, they did actually better.
Yeah.
Well, let me give my objective opinion about this particular person here. My issue with Jerry Tillery is this, and this has nothing to do with his stint in the Chargers. This has something to do with him as a football player. He doesn't have that dog in him. If you don't have that dog and you're playing interior D lineman, you shouldn't be playing football.
He's soft.
He don't have the dog in him.
Well, he's from Notre Dame, so.
Well, then, I'm not going to go there.
They set their own schedule.
Right. I'm not going to go there, but he just don't have that dog in him. He doesn't.
Tillery has moments. Tillery has moments, but he's not that dependable every down guy.
You have to lead him to it. You have to lead him to the tackle. If he has to find it himself, he'll never see it.
There you go.
You don't want that.
If someone shoves him into
like a blind dog well, I'm not. You know what? I'm not going to use that.
Yeah. Nope. Not good
there.
enough for a woman. Not good enough for a football player. That's not going to work, guys.
Hello. So yes,
I'll
yeah,
sit on my
because
hands on
I think he's stuck in the middle, especially if y'all draft the interior D lineman in the first round. Let's say hypothetically you land Jalen Carter or Kalaji Clancy, right? Because they should be there for you at your picking at the first pick, right? You land those guys. You drafted Butler and Farrell late last year. You're developing them. You have Nichols in fold already, who's better than Tillery in my opinion. So where does Tillery fit? I mean, he's the odd man out. You have two developmental rookies. You got a stud that you drafted in the first round, and you have your start playing the starters. So again, where does he fit?
Well, like I said, he might not. He could be a depth piece, either him or Jenkins. I don't see both of them making the roster. So again, this is where when you bring in young talent and you have them really compete, this will put rubber to the road. This will force Tillery to have to pick up his game or not make the team.
Yeah, like I said, he don't have that dog in him.
You know what? And I agree. Like I said, despite the hate, I'm kind of pointing at you there, Snappy, because I got to do it on an angle here.
Thank
Okay,
you.
it's correct. It's still correct. Okay. No. You gotta think opposite. Think opposite, senor. Think opposite.
There you go.
It's like that painting.
Yeah.
It's like that one
Right.
painting.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that the finger you think is the other one? Like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
I will-
this finger. Okay.
Oh, Jesus. See? Yeah.
Okay?
We know that's universal.
I will say one thing about Tillery though, which has kind of gone under the radar. Tillery, when he had his best games, Chandler Jones also had his best games. So when Tillery was playing at the top of his game, Chandler Jones was actually producing. And again, that's something I think that goes under the radar. Now, I'm not sure that can happen again. Chandler Jones, we might have had lightning in a bottle a couple of times. I think when the Raiders picked him up, he was way past his value. And again, there's a guy who's going to be stuck on the roster just simply because of salary cap issues. I'm hoping that we get some production out of him this year, but I think he's gone after the 2023 season. So I'm just hoping we get as much production as possible out of Chandler Jones, and hopefully if Tillery can come in and the two of them can tag team and both play well productively in tandem with each other, then that's a good thing.
I'm with DZ. Fit him for a USFL jersey and get it over with.
So I'm going to ask this.
Hey, dude, not even the XFL?
Nope.
Yeah.
USFL.
There's
That's
my dog
right.
objecting.
So-
do you think Jalen Carter's a realistic?
We
pick at
haven't heard a
7?
ton from Cameron.
Tom had a question, Rich. Tom had a question.
That's all right. I'm not. I don't expect Broncos fans to have manners.
Let me answer
like
that
this guy
question
too.
throughout there.
Yeah.
You're asking about Jalen Carter.
Just
To
with
be-
the off the field stuff, do you think that's especially given the nature of his incident and not to I'm not making light of what the Raiders have dealt with, but
No,
having
Fits right in. He fits right in.
Absolutely. If he were to fall to 7, if the Raiders pick him, that's because McDaniels and Ziegler have done their due diligence and they believe that it's not going to cause as much of an issue going forward. Although I believe with all the things that the Raiders went through with Henry Ruggs, that's really that's collateral damage on your fan base, and you have to really take that as into account. But if they bring him on, I think that they will feel like all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. Here's what I think, though. The Seattle Seahawks have 2 first-round picks, courtesy of the Broncos there. So I think Seattle is the ideal spot for Jalen Carter because, again, you've got a lot of veterans there. You've got 2 first-round picks. So even if they brought in Carter and he was to flame out, they still have that other second first-round pick to back them up. I think Seattle is the ideal spot for him. If he falls to number 5, I think that's where he goes off the board.
Fair.
Cam, we haven't heard a ton from Cam. Cam, believe it or not, actually has quite a Rolodex of draft knowledge here, and I'd love to hear his thoughts on the Raiders roster before we slowly progress forward and move on.
You're far too kind on the Rolodex,
Broncos and where our roster's at.
You're far too kind with the Rolodex. You're far too kind with the Rolodex comment. But hey, I will take it. I will take the compliment. I was just gonna add, like, with the way that things, certainly go with the Raiders. I mean, they can I think the thing is, like, they can pass on a guy like Jalen Carter. Like, they don't need to, certainly, because when you think about, like, the defensive talent, like, within this draft, when I say by pass, I mean, like, if they don't take him, and another team certainly took him before him, like, because there's far more depth in this draft on the defensive line and on the edge talent that they can go out and get someone else, that's can come in on that day one, or even be like an impact player for them on that defensive side. And they don't even, it doesn't even have to be Kalijah Cansey for that matter either. So, but I'd be kind of curious to know the thinking as far as why Hunter Renfrow would be moved. Because, I mean, like, logistically, when you think about all the receivers, with that have gone through the Patriots system,
he's a prime candidate.
As far as Wes Welker,
short white dude. That's what he likes.
Julian Edelman. I'd be kind of curious to know, like, why isn't he his guy? I guess that's kind of like the thing that I'd be kind of curious to know is, like, for you Raider guys, is like, why would, I mean, I get the logistics of new guy comes in, he wants his own guys, but as far as the way Hunter Renfrow is, he would fit McDaniel's system like a glove.
Well, I like Hunter Renfrow, and I could see it play out either way. If I have my general manager hat on, I'm trading him to see if I can get a third-round pick and put as many guys together who are my picks as possible to form the base of this team. Once again, Renfrow is a carryover from the Gruden/Mayock administration. Not to say he's a bad player, but again, he meshed well with Derek Carr. Derek Carr is no longer there. So once again, you're looking at a new scheme and a new fit. Plus, Hunter has had quite a bit of injury over the past year. You can't get past the fact that a guy of his size has concussions a whole lot now. And for somebody that small, I think it's a lot more of an impact. And playing the position that he does, the slot, where he's going to get a lot more hits. Fortunately, they did bring somebody in, I think, to return punts. So I think he's not going to be doing that anymore. But again, I don't think that there's anything uniquely special about Renfrow to warrant keeping him on the roster just for what he's done. As you've heard so many GMs say, and head coaches, it's not what you've done in the past, it's what you will do going forward. And if you look at last year as an example, I think Hunter has a long way to go to restore himself to where he was his first two seasons.
And if I might add as well, the Raiders did went out and go, and on like the first or second day of free agency, they picked up the receiver that was in New England. That is the real, like the black Hunter Renfrow. Okay, if you want to go there, because remember they were saying that you're saying that the Patriots have all of these white guys. You said Edelman and Welker and Amendola. And by the way, Amendola's on our roster as a coach, so we can always throw some pads on him if we need to. But they went out and they got the guy who likes to throw touchdown passes to the Raiders, and he's already on our team. The touchdown pass was the Chandler Jones guys. That's anyway. But he is the guy who shakes and bakes and gets in that system, was the slot guy that did the work. Okay, I believe he was the number one receiver for the Patriots last year, and he definitely was a top two for them in that system. And the Raiders went out and signed him. I'd like to keep Hunter, but based on thank you, Jacoby Meyer. The thing is that and under the old New England way, you like to have players that are multifunctional, and that there is a lot of that going on with the way that this roster appears to be built, or at least in year 2 is going towards that. Yeah, multifunctional players, guys that can do a couple different things. But I really think that if you got a guy who is, I don't want to say he's got an injury history, but yeah, he got his bell rung, which is the main reason why we lost the Cardinals game. Okay, that was the reason why we lost the Cardinals game. And he has some other nagging injuries, and he, unfortunately, quote unquote, he's not my guy. And it's unfortunate that he's not my guy, but you went out and got Jacoby Myers, who is that guy. And they signed Philip Dorsett, who maybe, remember what Tom was saying, that there are players that in their second stint with a different team really come out and perform.
Philip Dorsett's like fifth opportunity
with the Patriots in that stint. No, it wasn't. It was a Hunter Renfrow fumble. You ass! I'm pointing everywhere here.
Oh man!
That's right. Acceptance is the first step of the grieving process, my friend.
Right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So yeah, I think we covered off the Raiders to a good degree. Let's talk about the Broncos news here. Cameron, let's get your take on exactly what's happening with the Broncos and your needs now. Is a short line of defense when it comes to draft picks at this moment because of the Russell Wilson deal, but how can you guys maximize your potential in the mid rounds?
Well, I was going to say, aside from the fact that the biggest need would be, Russell Wilson playing better in 2023, that would be like the biggest need. Aside from that, and then of course addressing the biggest need of the elephant in the room, which was a new coach. They certainly got that taken care of. I feel like it could go a variety of different ways. When you look at as far as say the defensive front, look, I'm a big Randy Gregory fan. I love him as a player, but the old adage, the best ability is availability, and Randy Gregory just can't stay on the field. And they do have enough talent there still, but again, it's a bunch of unknowns. And I think that's the thing with this Broncos team, is there's just a whole bunch of unknowns, which opens a lot of that doors for other positions to jump forward as far as need. And that would be, that edge position, that pass rushing position. And so I think the edge is probably, right up there as far as, where the Broncos can certainly go. I can't necessarily, say, the certain like directions of where they're going to go, because when you only have such a limited amount of picks, you truly have to throw darts, as far as getting those types of players. So edge is certainly one of those key positions. Lloyd Cushenberry is also, to use a phraseology of his name, his cushion is pretty soft right now. I mean, like
he's pretty bad.
Yeah. So I mean, he's not good, and I mean,
he's bad.
And so
I like this guy.
Yeah, and so overall, I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of the overall position, center is certainly one of them. And I think also when you look at the cornerback room, and look, Pat Surtain is maybe the best cornerback in the game. That's certainly up for debate, right?
He's up there. If he's not one, he's up there.
Yeah, but so he's definitely up there. But DeMar Mathis certainly showed out to possibly be a solid enough number 2, even though he was picked on by Sir Justin Herbert a lot. But I mean, he did kind of fare well for being the rookie that he was. But he did do well. But in this day and age, you can never have too many cornerbacks. And the Broncos, for a secondary and where they are in that kind of room, certainly wouldn't hurt to add that kind of piece certainly there. This is one I think is kind of like I really do think it's kind of like one of those like sticking points sometimes with people within Broncos country. And I feel like the linebacker position also needs to be addressed too, as far as some of their bigger needs too. Look, Alex Singleton played well. He shattered DJ Williams' tackle record with like 160 some tackles. He really played well, earned himself the contract extension. Josie Jewell certainly played, up to his certain standards. But he's also on the last end of his deal. So where do the Broncos certainly view that as a need going forward? I think is going to be, certainly, something to certainly watch. And as far as a wild card need, that would be replacing Brandon McAnus in the room.
Wow.
Yeah. So they got to figure out a way. Yeah, McAnus. Yeah. So
I like that guy.
Yeah.
I always see the missed kicks outside of Mile High.
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
So
I hate to admit this, especially live and in public, but my dad's actually a Broncos fan, was born in Colorado. So whether or not I want to or not, I follow the team extra close, especially since you guys haven't beat us in a long time. But I think one of the things that gets lost, just as AFC West people, like we're just, giving each other crap all the time. But like you guys limped through last season. And so I think some of it's just getting healthy, right? Because I look at your offense on paper, it's like Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick. Those are good players, right? Getting Javonte Williams back. I think the pickup of Samaje Perine was underrated as just another like reliable guy. Those two could really, put some bruises on some defenses if they get churning. So on paper, I think there's reason for optimism, but I agree. Like there's some defensive holes you guys got to work through.
Yeah. Well, and I think, obviously I didn't say running back, but I mean, that's, certainly one of those other needs that's going to fall into there. Because the health of Javonte Williams is maybe the greatest question mark, at least for this running game. But thankfully, we did sign Samaje Perine that he can tote the rock a little bit and, be that kind of guy in that short interim if they need it, because he can certainly be a starter if they need it. And this running back class is certainly decent enough, that they can, go out and address it. Because if I'm not mistaken, the only guys that's on the roster right now is Javonte and Samaje Perine and, a few people that were undrafted free agents that they brought on the roster, which we all know when you have an undrafted free agent like that, that kind of leaves you the area for still addressing a need like that, despite the unknown there.
You know who would be fun? I know they said you're a draft guy. And even with those two guys on the roster, they're both kind of bigger, power runners. Tyjae Spears out of Tulane would be a fun guy to put in that Sean Payton offense. But not that I'm here to give the Broncos any help or any suggestions. But as you're talking about it, I'm like, look at those running backs. Like that would be a good compliment to the other two guys you have there. And I think he's got some long-term upside. But don't tell Denver that. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Don't tell Sean. Don't tell Sean.
Well, I think that's the kind of fun thing too with this draft on the running back position is because
so deep.
There's a lot of fun running backs that they can go after and pass catching backs that they can go after. Like it isn't just Tyjae Spears, it is, Deuce Vaughn, like the guy who is like, from Kansas State. He's small. He could possibly fit that. He could possibly, fit the Sean Payton mold of what he's certainly seen in the past with another Kansas State with another Kansas State running back, Darren Sproles. So that's certainly a case. Devon Achane is another one. As far as another player that they could go after. I really also am intrigued by Chase Brown. The possibility of Chase Brown.
That's a good one. I like that one. Yeah. Deuce is a little light. We call it leader, light in the arse.
He's
only 165 pounds.
I basically call him. He's a 5'5", 5'6" version of Philip Lindsay. Like the guy just can. The guy that's not
as fast as Lindsay though either. He's not as fast as Lindsay either.
That's not against him by any means. It's just he's small, but he can certainly pack a punch when he runs. But as we all know, Philip Lindsay's in the XFL now. So Rest in
Cameron,
peace.
you're talking me into Eckler going to the Broncos. I just there's so many reasons for it now.
That was my
at all. Like
Eckler for Judy swap here. Why don't we just do
no,
that?
we're not trading them anything. They'll have to get
No
him in free
bum,
agency.
dude. No picks. You guys.
That was my
done. To get them for free, huh?
That was my last comment, to say, or we could just, wait in 2024 and, sign the local kid, the best local kid, and get Austin Eckler, pair him with Joe Lombardi, certainly have it be all right in the world. That's exactly what I was going to go for.
Yeah, and throw 30 screen passes a game. There you go.
You're right. One need I actually think I did not get a chance to mention is obviously the elephant in the room, which you guys mentioned with the wide receiver room.
Elephants in there.
It's still the wide receiver room.
Hey! I've lost a couple pounds, you bastard.
So
you're pointing the wrong way again.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make though is that for all the Broncos stuff that they have with optimism, they still suck and they have a lot of needs. That's basically what I'm trying to go for.
The hell of a headline.
As I said,
I like that.
This is the first part of the grieving cycle. So
right there you go. There you go. What was this 5 stages of grief, whatever it is?
Yeah,
exactly. The first step, acknowledging that you have a problem.
Self-loathing.
There you go. Self-loathing. That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one. Yes, indeed. Yes,
shower
indeed.
beers.
Yes. So, quick question for you, Cameron. Now, if you had your choice in where you picking, there's no trade up, no trade down. Like, who is your guy? Who's a reasonable guy? If you had one guy that you wanted to pick in that third round, what is your top guy? Who's your top guy that if you had to have this guy in the third round, who would you get?
All right, I got to pull out the the Santa draft list and
there you go.
And look at and look at all 20 guys and do an any, mini, miny, mo scenario here. But
I'm raising my hand. Can I go?
Yeah.
I got a perfect guy for you.
I got to go with my bias, unfortunately, but it makes sense. We talked about the position, but he's a big time favorite for me. I've actually had the opportunity of watching him a lot with college and stuff, and he also had a visit and has been linked with the Broncos, and that would be Trey Palmer.
I like it. I like it.
I like
it.
Speed. I like him in KC Red, so I get it.
Yeah. So
he definitely looks good in powder blue. So hey, I'm with it.
Yeah. So I think overall, like me, so selfishly, I'm a Cornhuskers fan. That's basically like where I'm going to start with that. Like I'm a Cornhuskers fan, but when you go down and you look at the way he is as a player, where he came from, people may not know this, but wide receiver coach Mickey Joseph has recruited him for a very, very long time, like since back when I think he was like before he was in high school, and so he's been touting him for quite a while. He's like a father figure to him. So when he went over to LSU, he was a part of the biggest core of wide receivers that we've ever seen, in terms of 2 wide receivers, that being Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And we all know at LSU, you're not going to see the field with those 2 studs at wide receiver. So
wide receiver,
yeah. So basically, he decided, well, with Mickey Joseph being hired as the wide receiver coach / assistant head coach in Nebraska, that he just take his talents to Lincoln. And in his first opportunity to shine, he turns out in a 1,000-yard performance and breaks school records, single-handedly, basically being the number 1 offensive weapon in Lincoln. And he's certainly got that raw ability, but I mean, he's got like that ideal size that you want to work with. He runs, that KJ Hamler speed, but he's got, to use a Broncos analogy, he's got the KJ Hamler speed, but he's got the hands of Emmanuel Sanders. Like that's basically the guy that you're looking at with a Trey Palmer. I think he would be fantastic in the AFC West.
True. Yeah, that
Nebraska
6'1",
does have.
Yeah.
What?
Can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you real quick?
No, go right ahead.
I think Trey Palmer's going to be there in round either 4 or 5. I think he's going to drop that far. So I think you
just
still
might
pick him up. So what you're looking at your draft, third round, if you're looking at somebody who's going to be a real impact player, DeJuan Jones, who's the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, if he's there, you definitely have to take a look at him. And also Isaiah Foskey, the edge rusher out of Notre Dame. So those would be two key parts right there. If you're looking at a wide receiver, you could look at Tyler Scott, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati. But the guy that I was saying, let me pick for you is offensive tackle Blake Freeland out of BYU. I think he's going to be a stud when you take a look at a good value pick for the third round. And again, I'm thinking a lot of Dylan Parham, who the Raiders picked up in the third round last year. Blake Freeland could be a really good plug and play guy. And so if you're looking at a young offensive tackle who's built for that line, I think that you couldn't go wrong with that pick.
Yeah, I mean, and that was certainly a position that we didn't get a chance to touch on with the tackle position, and especially with the rumors that have been swirling from, Garrett Bowles and potentially even moving on from him. His contract is up, and, certainly the year that the Broncos have they may have the bookend tackles for just this year, but they may need that long-term, left tackle. And so that's certainly the case. Matthew Bergeron would be another one that would kind of fit that. Gives him that kind of flexibility with him being a left tackle and a right tackle. And Denver, has in the past notoriously loved that kind of versatile tackles before, And
I think Trey Palmer will still be there for you. So you pick up an additional need and pick him up too.
Well, and I was just going to say quick, like, even though I love Trey, like, that's the thing is, like, there are a lot of other exciting wide receiver weapons for you. I mean, like, just plug in Tank Dell and Sean Payton's system, or
I don't think Tank's gonna be there in the third round. No,
I who knows? Yeah. But like even
I don't know. I mean,
yeah, with his height and everything, you don't know with the way teams might actually view it with his height and everything. But Trey, with also that 1 year that he had, that only 1 year that he had, could be enough to scare teams off that he does fall into the fourth round. But I mean, Jaden Reed's another one. Jonathan Mingo. Mark Marvin Mims. The Arkansas wide receiver is escaping me. He's like 6'4", but runs a 4.3 or something like that. But
was that
Landers or something?
Terry. Not A.T. Terry. Who was it? He said
Matt Landers.
And Landers.
Cedric.
Matt Landers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of options that they can go to if they wanted that wide receiver position. And I think
that's a good question though, because y'all have a full wide receiver room. So would somebody have to be moved? If you picked up a wide receiver in the third round?
It would depend. The reason why I think I go after like those kinds of fast burner type wide receivers is because of the unknown of a guy like a KJ Hamler, or even to be said, like, there's some speculation Montreal Washington may be moved, say like that running back position / wide receiver position. And so are we looking at potentially like a new burner threat? And granted, I mean, KC knows this all too well. You can't have just one burner threat, so, I mean, if you have multiple different weapons like that on your offense, it certainly wouldn't hurt, to have that kind of, weaponry in your arsenal.
Hey guys, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. I have to back out. I have to take off. I get up early in the morning. I get up like 3:00 in the morning Eastern to go to work at the airport. So I have to back out here. But it was a pleasure being on with you all. I look forward to maybe joining you all again soon. Best of luck and good health to everybody. And Jack,
call you the Oracle now.
Yeah, there you go. Oracle. And I'm even older than Jack. So there you go.
Well, teach him a thing or two, so he has something to say later.
All right, that's it. Let me ask you a question.
Guys, have a great evening. I look forward to jumping on with you soon.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care.
Tom, thanks again for coming in, brother. Class. Unlike my ass.
Richie, I think your mic's muted.
It's okay. He can stay muted.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. I think the only time I've seen 3 a.m. is I've been awake for that and waking up.
I'll agree. So you didn't go to sleep.
I don't.
There you go.
Yeah. I don't think I woke up till 3 p.m. the next day.
Yeah, I might have did catch a flight to go to the Caribbean or something, but that's definitely a pleasure cruise, not for work. Yeah. Definitely not for work. So since Richie's muted, I guess we could talk about the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, we covered the Broncos enough, I'd say.
Yeah. I'm good.
So Senior Snappy, my good guy, fellow Charger mate, both fam in the building. Please tell me from your perspective, what do you think our biggest needs are going into this season in the draft?
Oh man. Everything except quarterback, and I'm okay with our kicker and our punter. So,
wow.
Yeah, let's see. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with something spicy like center?
That is spicy.
Center.
Corey Lindsey.
I don't have any suggestions as to who we should draft at center, but it's a real delicate situation. We just re-signed our kind of journeyman backup, Will Clapp, and the few snaps that he played for the Chargers last year were a disaster. Got Justin hurt. I mean, he didn't have.
He got put in against Chris Jones, though. I mean, I don't blame him. I'd probably do the same thing.
It wasn't just that. Like he was a complete and utter disaster all year. It didn't matter. It was Chris Jones or Bob Jones. He was getting his cheeks clapped. Is what he was doing. And pun intended.
And it wasn't just a meme. It wasn't just, I know. It wasn't just his play. The whole line didn't play well when he was at center. And so, that there is really that, and we just can't have that. We've got a pretty good line as it is. The depth is a real problem across the board, but at the line, center's the biggest concern for me. Clapp is definitely not the answer. If Lindsley goes down again, he's getting older. Lindsley's great, but he's getting older. It's going to be a lot to ask him to put another full season in. We've got this other guy, Weaver, which I don't recall seeing at all. So I don't know what his situation is, but 21st pick, if there's a decent center, that'd be the first thing I'm going for. What do you think, Coach?
I could vehemently disagree. You have to look at it from a perspective of if you're going to pay Corey Lindsey to play, he has to play. I wouldn't spend a first round pick on a center. Obviously, when you need areas that need to be addressed from a wide receiver perspective. That's my biggest and most glaring need. Now I understand that Corey Lindsey is a little bit older, but yet again, he has 3 years left on his deal. I mean, we're not looking at a Brian Bulaga situation where he came in and instantly got hurt and never really played for us. Corey's played. He just had a little knickknacks here and there. He's missed a game or two. And like you said, he's been a disaster. It's been a disaster on the O-line when, from a signal calling perspective and an adjustment perspective when he's out. But if he's holding, he's right, and he's playing, I would hedge my bet on drafting a center early because of that fact, because we do have him in-house and we are paying him. So I would say wide receivers are more of a glaring need in the first round for me.
Well, let's talk about wide receiver for a second. So I think a lot of people are saying that we need speed, that's our biggest problem is we don't have speed to take the top off the defense. I've gone round and round about it, but I think the bigger problem is our run game. And I think that the fact that no one has to honor our run game is why we can't get wide receivers open down the field very much. And so I would honestly focus much more on the running game and therefore making sure that we've got a extremely solid offensive line throughout the year that we're well backed up. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I definitely always agree. These guys can tell you that I preach balanced offense when it comes down to how teams run their offense. Right, you can't be one dimensional on either side. Like you have to be able to be balanced and be able to do be able to pass well and run the ball to close out football games if nothing else. But I would say that based on the way the league is facing, the way the league is running right now, it's more of a passing league. I don't want to call it archaic, my mindset or way of thinking, but I wouldn't focus too heavily on running the ball. I would say that it's a necessity, but it's not something that you need to overlook in regards to having a valid and lethal passing offense. So I think we should highly invest in receiving and tight ends when it comes down to this draft early in the draft, especially with the depth and the talent level that it has early on in the draft. I think if you don't address it now, You may not ever. And again, we're looking at it from a perspective of building not only for the present but the future, because the guys you pick up right now are going to be tied to Justin Herbert for the majority of his career. We talk at least 4 to 5 years of guys he can build chemistry with. Because I mean, let's be honest, Mike Williams with his age, Keenan Allen with his age especially, are not going to be tied to Herbert for the entirety of his career. You gotta look at it from a youth perspective and say that these guys not only are going to be, valuable now, but they're going to be valuable going forward, and they're going to be building with Herbert and growing with Herbert as the years go by. And there will be, air quote, cheaper, options, because Keenan and Mike are garnering both $20 million a year. But if I can bring a rookie 2, 3, or 4 that can be as productive and less expensive, because Herbert's going to get more expensive, I would do that versus investing in a heavy running game, because a lot of people have been on this Bijan Robinson train, and I'm here to tell you, Bijan is not going to change your life from an offensive perspective, versus 2 or 3 good slot receivers, in my opinion.
Taller than Zeke or Lenny, I'm telling you right now.
I don't want either.
Well,
they can stay where they're at.
Let's say that
Kellen likes to have 2, So
let's say that I will slightly cede your point that maybe a center in the first round is not a good idea. But I think a center early. I'm going to stick with that one. But let's talk about tight ends for a second. What do you think of Darnell Washington? Because I'm looking just at his measurables, and I'm just thinking Chargers have drafted too many guys that were undersized. They were too skinny, thinking that they were going to fill out in a year or two, and they're still kind of not there.
Donald Parham,
Washington, that's enormous.
Yeah,
6'7", 264.
Right.
That to me sounds pretty attractive.
It is. I did like him early on until I watched his tape. Now he's a freakish athlete, and he tests well. He looks good on air, but his receiving ability and his catching ability leaves a little bit much to be desired. I mean, he wasn't even the best tight end on his team in Georgia, so I think there are better options in the draft. Of course, Kincaid is the number 1 on your list. Musgrave is 2 for me. I would say that 3 would be Laporta and or Tucker Kraft. I even like Zach Kuntz late. Zach Kuntz is an athletic freak, 6'8". I mean, great catch radius, and he catches the ball. He's very handsy with the ball as far as the seam routes that he's caught at Old Dominion. So I like those guys more so than I like their film more than I liked Darnell's measurables. Put it that way.
I'll tell you what,
he's a great willing blocker, though. He'll block his ass off now.
I did watch Darnell Washington straight up just hurl a whole ass man. So I mean,
he's a willing blocker. I give him that.
If you could teach him to run a route and fine tune that, I think he might be the most athletic one out of all of them.
Yeah,
definitely
if I can,
extremely raw.
Yeah, if I can't get my hands on Musgrave, Kraft, or Kincaid, I would take Washington all day. I would.
Yeah.
So I have a question in terms of that tight end. So with Kellen Moore now taking
that you mentioned an ODU player and he's not a basketball player is amazing, because ODU, aka Old Dominion, is a basketball school, and I forgot that they actually had football. So
Taylor Heineke went there. He put him on the map.
Okay. What you got, Cameron? Cameron?
I was gonna say, with Kellen Moore now in the building, and him certainly coaching up a Dalton Schultz, why is it possible that Dalton Kincaid, a guy who probably also rivals a little bit of a Dalton Schultz,
I think he's better.
As far as a little bit of the play style,
right?
I mean, is he maybe that number 1 tight end that probably could be in the eye of Kellen Moore?
I mean, possible, but I think if you're honest about it, his back is a concern for me. Now, he did get a clean bill of health from the doctor, but my issue with the bill of health thing, if you got to oversell the idea that you're healthy, I'm a little hesitant. It'll give me pause, because if you gotta loudly tell me that you're healthy, then you trying to make me feel comfortable enough to draft you early. That kind of deal. So if I had my choice right now, if I had to pick, I would pick up a guy that has less of an injury history, because we've had issues with people that have been, had a bad injury rap, for a good 10 years.
That's
so
for sure.
If I take a guy that's subsequently healthy, he's 100% or 80% healthy over a guy that's been 60% healthy, then I'm going to take the 80% guy. So I would take Musgrave over Kincaid just based on injury.
Kellen Moore, Coach Moore is going to know Musgrave too, because he's a Northwest guy.
Right.
So,
Yep.
Right.
Mhm. Yep.
What I was gonna say
Yeah.
with the tight end class, like when it's that deep like that, you're almost okay passing on a Dalton
Agreed.
Kincaid, for
Agreed.
for
Agreed.
some
Well,
options.
And what I was going to say too is kind of, we talked about receivers, and I mean, I feel like for the most part, I'm not going to preface what me and Tom are going to get to, but I feel like everyone's going to say they want a receiver, and I think it's interesting, at least right now, that you see a lot of news about how every franchise is grossly devaluing the receivers in this class. I mean, what the guy from Ohio State's really the only one with the first round, solidified first round pick. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how guys fall. And, I think like we were talking about Trey Palmer earlier being 4th, 5th round. He could even go lower. I mean, and it seems to be kind of the same with the tight ends too. Like,
Or
the
higher,
kind of going
if it's
crazy
a
on,
run on. If it's a
Well,
run
yeah,
on receivers, it could go higher.
and like the Chelsea.
I actually think tight ends might have a run.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
I actually think that I think this draft is a little bit unique in the fact that, I mean, let's be honest, guys. I mean, the four of the Wild West podcast, we've had this discussion 3-4 weeks in a row now. Cam and I'm only singling out Cam because Cam and I have a rapport, if you will, being on the same network and all. In terms of wide receivers, we've come to a general consensus on this show that wide receivers are coming out in much broader and larger numbers, being more NFL polished. And as a result of that, as being a generally true statement, wide receivers are becoming almost a little bit more like running backs were, if you will, in terms of a dime a dozen and being able to come in and do the things they need to do at the NFL level. And that is in large part because of the spread offenses that are coming out in the college level. So these wide receivers are just becoming more and more heavily used and more kind of keystones of their offense at the college level. So therefore, it is less of a hurdle to come to the NFL level. Now, when you look ahead at kind of tight ends, having that Travis Kelce type, and Arrowhead Tom, that's me throwing over to you to kind of say yes. It's saying having that Travis Kelce type tight end on your roster is a rather unique scenario to find that unicorn within the mix, to find that blocking and receiving tight end that can do all of the things at a high level. I think you're going to see a huge run on tight ends just because of a Travis Kelce and some of the other guys.
But I don't know, man. Kelce was a 3rd round pick. And I feel like every tight end taken in the 1st round is not panned out. It is not even on the team that drafted him, right? Like Evan Ingram,
right. But
OJ Howard, dumped.
But
dumped.
That's besides the point. The point is that wide receivers were treated the same way that you just described in the tight end position, which is teams would want to draft wide receivers over and over again in the 1st round because they wanted to find like the next Jerry Rice. And, right? Like, let's just be honest. That's the way it worked, right? And now I have a funny feeling, and this is me projecting to what we're seeing in the draft and what we're seeing coming out of college, which is everyone needs to find that quarterback. Otherwise, your team is absolutely just tanked, right? But aside from that, it seems that wide receivers are almost plug and play now. So if that is a kind of a tick the box, regardless of who you get, they can kind of service your team properly, then that really brings you to the next best position in terms of mismatch, which is the tight end spot. And because you get dudes that are 6'7" and can run 4.3s or 4.4s or 4.5s, even at 6'7", which is rather remarkable. You're talking about rare air in terms of athleticism and size. And I think that you're going to get kind of the wide receiver, aura surrounding some of these tight ends. When people look at Kelce and some of these other dudes that are able to absolutely just blow the tops and kill games, where they want to find that next guy.
Well, I think tight end is such a hard position to adapt to in the NFL.
It is, yes.
Travis Kelce is obviously, one of one. I'll say this, though, this class in particular, the other thing about tight ends compared to wide receivers is, every team kind of views them differently and they utilize them differently. In this draft class, you have like whatever flavor you want. If you want your more traditional inline guy, there's Michael Mayer. If you want a smaller pass catcher, like the Travis Kelce, there's Dalton Kincaid. If you want to go old school, blocking tight end, Darnell Washington is a guy. Everybody talks about him being like a Mercedes Lewis type. And then you've got, like I said, I'm a big fan of Sam Laporta. Even down the board, there's some guys. I think that you're probably right when you say there's going to be a run. I think the biggest thing is it's not going to be early in the first round. I think it could happen end of day one, early day two, or the middle round of day two, because like these guys are going to come off the board.
Third round.
They're probably going to be clustered around.
Yeah.
Once one or two of them, because I don't see. And again, unless one of those just draft surprises happen, as much as people. As much as there's value in like Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid, I don't think they're going to be top 15 guys, right? And so I think you're going to end up with them in the late 20s, early 30s, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw a run on tight ends the first 50 or so picks, just because, like you said, the wide receiver class, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, has some warts in it, has some things that not everybody is enamored with, and there's probably going to be a lot of teams waiting to kind of hold out if they don't get one of their two top guys. So it makes sense to try to add another weapon to the offense. If you can't get a wide receiver, get a tight end. So
especially if a guy's 6'5" and 250 plus who can run reasonable 40 times, right? Like that's
like every tight end now, though.
Nowadays, yeah, that's the thing. If you run a 4.6, you're like, really? You're that slow?
The tight end we had in
exactly
college was 6'5". He didn't run he was at least huge.
Chargers have had a great run of really excellent skill players, but hardly any of them ever block. Give me offensive players that block. That's what I want to see.
I'll give Keenan Allen credit. He will run block as a wide receiver, but that's about it.
He won't do every play though. Like that's
all he can do.
That's true.
Yeah.
Hey, I heard that, Alex.
So he said
KC was going to get exposed. So
as a Broncos fan, I look at a wide receiver like Tim Patrick, who is probably one of the best well-rounded wide receivers and even skill position players on our roster. He will both run block and he can pass catch. He can do all of the things that you ask of that type of player. And not to mention, he also is like 6'4", and all of the various measurables that you're looking for in a wide receiver. And that's why all of the AFC West teams kind of low-key hate him as an opponent, because no one wants to admit that he's kind of that good, but everyone kind of recognizes that he is that good. And I think that's one of those really rare things from a guy that is that blend of size and speed. Now, he's a wide receiver, but to what we've been talking about, throughout this little block here, which is you can get tight ends that are in that type of rare air as well. And I think that you get a guy like Kelce, again, throwing over to Alex and Arrowhead Tom, who fits that rare mold that can kind of
call him God.
Right, exactly. and so you got a guy that fits that rare air mold that can kind of route run and block, and has the side speed blend that kind of gets you to those next yards, gets those first downs, gets those kind of core plays. Tim Patrick is the Broncos version of that guy. He happens to play wide receiver, but you can also look at Travis Kelce, who plays the tight end position, who is then expected to inline block as a result of their positional group. But frankly, Tim Patrick does the same thing.
So one of the block, they don't run the ball.
Just one other thought on the tight end conversation, especially if you've got I think of the Chargers, especially, you got to pay Herbert coming up. Like, tight ends are a lot cheaper than wide receivers. Top end tight ends. I mean, Travis Kelce,
long term, absolutely.
If you get one that works, again, there's not all of them work out, and I know we keep saying Travis Kelce, but he's one of one. You gotta have realistic expectations, right? But even you get a guy who's at like an Evan Engram, level, right? You saw what he did in Jacksonville for Trevor Lawrence, and it wasn't like, he wasn't the greatest thing ever or whatever, but that helped move that offense forward. that guy's going to be a lot cheaper than that wide receiver.
Yeah, we're talking
position.
about $10 million in discrepancy because Evan Ingram's commanding about a franchise tag about $10, $11 million on a franchise tag versus a $20 million receiver. So yeah, there's a big difference. And
so
but
there's
again,
some
that goes
business
back
to
to my
it too.
yeah, that goes back to my point about being young and being, relatively cheap and productive at those positions. If you got a guy that, is athletically gifted, you can definitely get some production out of them early. And for the first 4 to 5 years, they're virtually, slow, low market, $2, $3, $4 million guys with a $55 million quarterback. That's a win in my book.
Anything on a cheap contract is a win when you have quarterback still.
100%. Now, real quick, because I want to make sure we cover everything for all of the fans who are joining us both during and after the fact. Cam, I think this bodes well for both us and for Chargers fans. We kind of hinted at Tillery, who the Chargers decided to kick out the door. You and I have some independent issues we may differ on, which I think is wonderful. I know that people can actually hear me. I think this makes for a much more interesting show. But when we look at interior defensive line between the Chargers, the Broncos, even the Raiders, who have now found Tillery, who I wasn't able to speak earlier. So here's my comment on that particular topic, which is scheme matters.
Yeah.
And Tillery may well fit the Raiders scheme for defense, which is great. And he may not have fit what the Chargers did on scheme, which is just fine in and of itself. And so, and Cam, to tie it all back to the Broncos, because, between you and I, that's what matters, is we got a guy named Shelby Harris who came in from being cut from a bunch of different teams who killed it for us on the interior defensive line. And I mean, he's one of my favorite players, even still to date, and I hope he comes back at some point. But I actually think that he was a guy that really fit the Broncos scheme. He didn't fit the other team's scheme that he was on. Tillery may not fit the Chargers scheme, but he's certainly fitting the Raiders scheme pretty well. And so when we look at the Chargers scheme, Coach,
I think that's a little bit of a overstatement, but go ahead though.
I knew that was coming.
You are entitled to your opinion.
I tried to object for you. Objection.
Right. Counselor, you're out of order.
The lawyer in Alex came out in him. There
Objection,
we go.
And I moved to strike.
You're out of order. And you're out of order. And you're out of order. The whole damn court is out of order. There's your movie reference.
So we're talking the legal version of Half Baked.
What was the release date of that movie, though?
So we're talking the legal version of Half Baked right there. So that's great.
There you go.
As we move forward, there's like multiple movie references in that whole.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. We've now solidified the show as covering all bases now at this point.
Still waiting on that quarter pounder, Thurgood.
Yeah, exactly. So as we look forward to the Chargers, very quickly going backwards to then go forwards to the Chiefs right after that, and cover things. Interior defensive line for the Chargers. Where are you guys at with that? Cam, you and I should probably touch base on that on the Broncos as well real quick, and then we can move on to the Chiefs because we need to make sure that the Chiefs are covered properly here as well.
Everybody got hurt. Every single one of them got hurt, except for the guy that we let go to the Steelers. So where do you want to start?
There you
I
go.
don't trust any of them now.
Yeah. Definitely was a mass unit ward in the interior D line. Definitely that. I think that we getting our stable front of Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day, who did manage to play the whole season. He didn't get hurt. He's the only one that didn't. But Seabass, Austin Johnson, and Otito Ojanobi, they'll be back. Morgan Fox is a rotational guy, more of a pass rushing rotational guy, though he's going to be in the fold as well. He did show flashes of good run defense towards the end of the season when he had to be thrust into duty because we just didn't have anybody left because the roster was completely decimated from injury. But I do believe that we could benefit from a later round pick of a road grading, space eating D lineman in the later rounds. Your Siki Aika, the Samoan killer. You know, I think him being 350 pounds, taking up space in the middle could be, yes, Sikiaki from you know, but I think somebody like that, a nice big frame guy from Baylor would be a good guy.
Show me
Maisie Smith from Michigan, you know, a guy like that, you know, a
Yeah.
guy 337 pounds,
Shoot
you know,
it.
guy to take up space in the run game. We just need somebody to take up space in the run game, the 8-eye run game, and keep Kendricks clean and allow him to be downhill, make plays. You know, I think that's the biggest thing for us. But interior D line, I think we're
So
okay
when
from
he
a starting
sits around
perspective.
the house, he sits around the house, right?
What do you mean by that? All right,
I got that one. That's a really old joke.
That's before my time.
Yeah, that's probably before everybody's time.
Yeah, anybody that doesn't have gray hair beard probably missed that one.
I'm a really old guy, man. My repertoire is showing, man. Come on.
Hey, man.
Um,
You start
While we're
talking
talking-
1960s. I can't relate.
while you're talking interior defensive line, because actually the Chiefs could benefit from taking a tackle too. So we'll throw that out there. One of the guys
Yeah,
I really like that.
Tom, that's a great segue. So let's talk
Yeah.
Chiefs.
Well, I'll just say we'll pick up there. Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin is a guy that I really like. I think
I do
he's
as
the
well.
player that a lot of people think. I'm kind of out on Siaka Ika. I'm not he's athletic and big, but I don't know. I just sometimes I feel like I don't see it. I think he's going to get gassed real quick in the NFL. And
I just need him to take up blocks. I don't need him to do anything
Yeah.
special. I just need him to eat up blocks. Yeah, that's all I need. I don't need him to do anything else. No, I don't need you on
Yeah.
third down
to
at
just
all.
absorb meat.
And I
Just
take
need
those
some
two
meat
guys
there.
and walk them to the sideline. That's your job.
Like a brioche bun. You just need him.
Yeah.
to
That's what
meat
Tillery
and juice.
did too, though. He just got blocked back into the.
He got blocked
He
to the sideline
absorbed a lot
instead of
of
taking guys
football.
with him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you get into it. Mozzie Smith is interesting. A lot of raw tools there. One guy, and I know he's kind of a bigger name in the class, but his stock's gone up and down. Like Brian Brzee out of Clemson, and one of the things that so he's obviously had a really just from a football perspective, his last year wasn't what was expected of him. Right, this time last year we were talking about him, in conversation up there with Jalen Carter and that kind of thing. For those of you who don't maybe follow college football or follow Clemson, Brian lost his younger sister either right before the season or early in the football season, and then the other part of that I didn't even learn about till just a couple weeks ago was that he actually had strep throat and ended up in the hospital and put on like 20 or 30 pounds because he was just stuck in the bed in the hospital for a while during the season, and so he had a really from a performance standpoint, like understandably a pretty rough season, but kind of towards the end of the year you saw some of those old flashes. And we're just going to start with the dark horse pick, I guess, for Kansas City, because we talk about interior defensive line, and he's a guy at 31. If he's sitting there, that's a team like the Chiefs have enough strength. You could take a swing on a player like that, but not to just steal that segue and run with it. But there's some interesting guys in this interior defensive line class. Sounds like and it's the same thing with tight end. Like I think defensive tackle is another one where you can like grab guys high, and the chances of it working out are about it's hit or miss, and it's a top position. I mean, that's a grown man position playing interior defensive line in the NFL. You gotta have a certain mentality to you, right? You gotta have that dog in you, as coach said. So it's a tough one. Not everybody has it. You got to be able to eat glass and so yeah,
eat lightning and crap
Not
thunder.
thunder.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
eat glass.
There you go.
So, I don't know. I mean, I can keep running with it, or you guys, what do you? I mean, the Chiefs obviously won the
I'm
Super
curious.
Bowl.
Keep chopping
everything's good right now, right? As I usually say,
Yeah.
we don't need to do anything because we got Patrick Mahomes. But then I get
Pretty
called
much.
a smug bastard, and so it's whatever. But I'm curious that obviously for the past 2-3 weeks now, kind of the four of us have almost repeatedly, updated our team needs based on what the Chiefs have done. And I mean, you and I both know, like the Chiefs have made some moves, but not really as much as you would think they would with the holes they have. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on if they stay at 31. Would you prefer to shore up either right or left tackle or shore up edge rusher? I mean, I know you talked about D tackle, but I'm curious as where you kind of value those positions or what you value the most to look at 31 for the Chiefs.
Yeah. So I'm gonna preface this with I will say what I would do, and
Yeah.
I just want to be on record that Brett Veach does listen. He does the opposite of whatever
Yeah.
I would like to see, which I can't complain about because we've got 2 rings out of it.
Right.
I would love for them to. I've been like for the past 2 or 3 years, like we really need a defensive end. Last year I was like, we need a defensive end, just anyone except for George Karlaftis. But again, I'm not in charge. No, I think that there's a lot of depth at the defensive end position in this class, so you can probably wait, even though I don't want them to. There might be a guy or two who falls that are just too good to pass up. One of the things that we talked about on the Kingdom Says podcast is Brett Veach's tendency to, like, he just has like all these insurance pickups, right? The wide receiver they just signed, Richie James. It's like, all right, nobody even knows who he is, but we're gonna just throw another body in there, right?
There he is.
You lose Juan Thornhill, and you go out and get Mike Edwards. It's like he's replacing these players like just here like with budget picks because you don't need to have a roster full of superstars. You just need to have a roster of good enough football players to stay competitive, and then Mahomes is going to push that difference. So, I think. I would love to see them go after a defensive end, but I also really love the Charles Omenihu pickup. But I think that they're still just so thin up front in terms of like depth and rotation. So I've kicked around the idea of them taking the kid from Northwestern, Adebore, like, just let him play well.
Coach is big on him too. We all are.
Yeah,
we all love him.
He's a freak.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your GM did great last year at picking up Karlaftis and all those other young kids in the draft because he had 12 picks, and he really did a lot with those picks because Karlaftis played well. The kids that were playing in the back end on D backs, they played well. Yeah. So maybe like
got
you said,
10 picks again too.
Brett will do the opposite, but it worked out pretty well for you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this year they just draft like 7 wide receivers and just see who actually works out. Because that seemed like that was the strategy last year with corner. They took I think they ended up with 5 guys in the secondary last year.
One of these guys going to play.
Yeah, well, they all played. They all played pretty well,
right?
Yeah,
they might not even all play receiver. I don't care.
Right? They're going to put them somewhere.
6'5", 230 frame. We'll put a few pounds on. Put them in right tackle.
Yeah, we'll throw them out there.
There you go. There you go.
I do think they're. Oh, go ahead.
I actually was Kyle in the chat here is kind of I think reading my mind or something, but I was gonna bring this up. Talking about sort of Veach's track history. I feel like maybe the last at least two out of the last 4 drafts they've moved up. Maybe not significant. Obviously moved up pretty significant for Mahomes, but moved up last year to jump Buffalo and get McDuffie. I think, and I've kind of been saying, I think that's certainly a huge possibility for KC. I mean, depending on, what position they're valuing the most, but I mean, it seems to me to be some sort of edge presence, whether that be on the offense or defense. And so I kind of think they're going to, see how the board falls and maybe move up to jump one of these other teams that need that, which kind of goes with what you.
I think that's a mistake. I actually think that KC's biggest need right now, when you look at where your team has been, is there's enough speed at wide receivers where you can get guys deep that can kind of burn the top off of the kind of defense. So I think you guys can develop guys with Mahomes having the arm that he does to kind of work guys later in the draft to kind of get, as long as they have the speed to
Well,
do
yeah,
it.
I don't think they're moving up. I mean, if they're moving up, it's for a tackle, like someone.
Right. I would agree that
like
there's
a DN.
Right.
Or,
So I agree
Kansas
that
or
positions
someone.
like offensive tackle, which if you actually look at the stats, like the true stats, the top offensive tackles, there has not been almost any that have been taken later than the first round.
No,
right. Like
yeah.
even the
They're
offensive tackles that have been taken
tackles are
late
good.
in the first round have been garbage. So, you guys need to trade up if you're going to try to obtain someone who's going to be meaningful on your team. But I actually think that when you look at position groups where you guys really need help, that's guys that can bolster Chris Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to be honest,
you got two people there. So
yeah, like outside of Chris Jones, it's kind of mediocre. And
Nandi. There's Nandi. That's it. I mean, that's the only other presence that's had been there.
And he's
right.
never
there. Right.
They don't use on third down.
So just to quickly kind of finish that off, and I want to throw over to both of you guys to kind of give your feedback. But as Cam and others here on the show know, when you're at a position group that's one injury away from not doing well, I'll look at the Chargers from last season when they lost, both of their edge rushers to injury, or even one edge rusher to injury. You need depth at key positions like interior defensive line. And you have Chris Jones, who is top 3 in the NFL at minimum. I mean, and I'm not trying to even belittle Chris Jones with that ranking. I'm just simply kind of giving a holistic view in terms of where I think he's at. He's at minimum top 3. And
for sure number 1.
And well, I mean,
he surpassed Aaron Donald at this point.
There's other guys who are basically fighting him for that spot, but let's be real. He is at worst top 3. And when you guys look at your team, you guys need another guy to help him out. You need another guy who can kind of be the guy if he gets hurt. And right now you don't have it. So I actually think that Arrowhead, Tom, you almost went there, but you didn't. I actually think you actually need a guy to help be like the Robin to the Batman of Chris Jones, and eventually get a guy that you think you can feel comfortable with handing over the reins to become Batman for the Chiefs. Otherwise, I think your guy's going to fall flat, because the NFL today, and Fangio recognized this pretty heavily, which is the interior to defensive line is such a key spot in the NFL today. You need to either do one of two things. You need to have a guy like Chris Jones, who's just a game wrecker who always stays healthy. Or number 2, you need to have a rotational group of guys who can constantly bring pressure, who are all at the same level. And right now the Chiefs don't have either. And well, Chris Jones is always
Chris Jones, man. What you mean?
No. Sorry. Let me dial that back a little bit. Chris Jones is getting older, and eventually he's going to start getting hurt. So you need to help plan for that. And I think your GM has done a tremendous job at identifying those key spots on the roster. And I think this year might be the IDL year.
It's funny. You said read my mind, because can you imagine a world with Chris Jones, and if the Aaron Donald comparisons are right on Kancey, if they get Kancey in the late first round,
be tight.
Yeah,
it would be
no, thank you.
A pretty big departure. A pretty big departure from what. So this is the burden of being a Chiefs fan. Sometimes is Steve Spagnuolo has a very specific type of defensive lineman: big, long, and slow. And that's
6'5", 280, 4'9", 20.
He's definitely north of that. He's definitely north of that.
Not to take anything away from Kancey, like a great football player, but that would be a pretty big departure. Like I said, I agree. I think that's why one of the thoughts that I've had, and even at 31, which might seem a little rich for him, is I do Adebawore, like. One of the other things that they value is being able to move guys inside out. In the Cincinnati game, Chris Jones was rushing from the edge a couple times on one of those sacks. And you just think about it. You have Omenihu, you have Carlot, like all 4 of those guys, you can line them up pretty much in any order you want. and that causes a lot of chaos up front. And I agree, they also need depth across. I saw Kyle, my co-host, is in here stalking the show, and he brought up Mike Dana, who's been a good depth beast, and finding some other guys like that along the way. And then, of course, we're going to get to training camp, and every year for the last couple of years, they've gone out and they've found, a Melvin Ingram or a Carlos Dunlap, some dude who's played in the NFL for, 10 plus years. Yep.
Yeah.
And they're just like, hey, here's a little bit of money. And
That's Danny Shelton.
No, but Dunlop
Come join
is
the locker room,
effectively Dunlop for the Kansas City Chiefs is the equivalent of a Bill Belichick cog.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Look, I'm an NFL fan and a football fan above all else. I'm wearing the Bronco orange, but I recognize game where there's game, and I also recognize a GM and a head coach that are on the same page. Kansas City, you guys are literally in lockstep with your GM and your head coach. Right? Like it's a fact. You can literally see it happening in real time.
It's pretty sweet.
And
it helps it helps when your head coach brought your GM into the league as a coaching assistant. And they've been together for 14 plus years, 15 years, whatever it is.
Right,
so.
Exactly. But the point is that when you have two guys that are on the same page or can speak to each other without having to say any words, that's a helpful situation, right? And so when you look at where you guys are at, like you guys seem to just kind of be on the same page throughout. And at some point, something is going to break, but I don't think it's going to break anytime soon.
I mean, nobody's, everything has an end to it, right? The 49ers dynasty did all that stuff. Like, we've seen the Patriots go from annoyingly, consistently good to what they are today. But right now, I think we're still at the pinnacle of some of that. It'll probably come when Andy Reid retires, right? And he's
right.
I think he just turned 65, and so those are going to be. I mean, we're talking about a top, at worst, a top five coach, in NFL history. So, and we can get into that another time. But he. Eventually, but right now we're living in the glory days, and we talk about it all the time because I grew up watching, Tyler Palco chuck a football 10 yards.
Tyler Thigpen and Brody Boyle, and
I will not stand for any Tyler Thigpen slander, but we watched some pretty bad quarterbacks, and right now that's the other thing about this, the way that this team has been constructed, the roster's been put together is, especially for the draft, like Brett Veach is not going to be backed into a corner. It's the same thing with wide receivers and Odell. Like he wasn't going to overpay. I think he learned his first kind of off season, when they spent, money on Sammy Watkins and on Anthony Hitchens and some other guys. I think they learned a little bit there. Obviously you don't have the same flexibility with Mahomes' contract, but even then they've kind of learned, my prediction is based on the visits that we've seen. I think they're looking at a tackle. I think that you look for a guy that has that left-right versatility, so that if the Juwan Taylor experiment doesn't work out, you think
a swing tackle then.
So I think it'll be somebody who starts the right
swing tackle, right? Like you're talking a swing tackle, right?
And they love versatility. Right. Like Andrew Wiley a couple years ago was a guard for the Chiefs, and then he became the right tackle one day.
Bread.
Yeah. Well, I mean.
What about Tardif, who is your the Frenchie from Quebec?
Doctor.
The doctor who obviously reclused himself back to Quebec because Canada.
We got a 4th round pick for him, so I call it.
No, but I think he's an interesting example of exactly what Arrowhead Tom was just saying, is that he had some immense versatility on the offensive line. They originally projecting him as be a guard, and he's trying to be a heck of a tackle, right? And so he's a great example from, I think, what you're referring to there, Tom, as a guy for your Chiefs who was projected for one position and turned out to be a better version of maybe another.
Yeah, well, that's what Andy Heck, the offensive line coach in Kansas City, is. He knows his stuff, and they've got some versatile pieces. Nick Allegretti is their swing interior guy, and he's been a great piece for the Chiefs for a couple years now. There's a stretch where Joe Tooney, I think, missed a game and a half, and Allegretti stepped in, and you could tell there's a difference because Joe Tooney's a top tier player, but it's been interesting to watch the offensive line. But I think with the lack of really like the receiver class, like with receivers, there's different makers, and then there's guys with a pair of hands. And I see this class as just a lot of guys with a pair of hands. And so I think the strategy going forward is we're just going to build a wall in front of Mahomes and give him 10 seconds to throw and see what happens. And I think that's a pretty fun strategy for at least
pretty.
For the rest of you, I apologize in advance. But you just give him as much time as you can, be able to run the football more consistently, all that. Just continue to make that offense churn. So I think that we talked about the possibility of a move up. I would say Anton Harrison is kind of that bottom of that first, like the top of that second tier, bottom of that first tier tackle rankings. The other guy I wouldn't be surprised because I think he may fall a little bit would be Miles Murphy out of Clemson. You talk about the defensive line. I think if he's sitting there in the mid to late 20s, I'm on the phone making calls. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a move up because it is in Kansas City. I know that they want to, put on a show and make it memorable. But there's like I said, there's a couple guys that could fall. Or again, I think, if you believe in what Brian Brzee can be, he's an interesting name to watch.
Definitely.
So, and I'll just throw this last one out there. Other dark horse position I mentioned. They lost Juan Thornhill, and they might be looking at again if a guy. Why am I blanking on the safety from Alabama? Brian Branch. If Brian Branch,
I was thinking that's what you were thinking about. Yeah,
like that'd be a little bit of an out there pick, but like they play so many 3 safety formations. It'd be an interesting one, and gives you some flexibility if a guy like L'Jarius Sneed can't get a contract done. So lots of possibilities, but they're in a position to kind of be flexible in whatever they do. They can sit there and just kind of let things come to them, or they can go up and get a guy they really believe in.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. Before everyone, I want to make sure we cover as much as we can here and give all of you the due that you deserve. We have a Senior Snappy who is still with us right now. We have Arrowhead Tom. We have had T3 and Cameron Parker, all who have their own podcasts. If you would like to follow either of their podcasts, please reach out to them on Twitter. Find their podcast. Tom, can you just broadcast where people can find you and the details of where they can, get in touch and find the other content you produce? And Senor, you're next. I want to have the same content from you. I want people to know where they can find you as well.
I appreciate that. You can find me on Twitter on Twitter at Arrowhead Tom. Pretty straightforward. I had to make that for a minute. I get to co-host the Kingdom Says podcast with 2 great guys, Kyle and Garrett. Our podcast Twitter handle is at Kingdom Says Pod. Pretty simple. Would love to, especially if you want to talk football or draft stuff. Even if you're not a Chiefs fan, I get in trouble all the time for talking about the draft stuff. So come over and
I don't know. I actually reached out to you, Tom, about a year or 2 ago, and you snubbed me like a senior snubbed a freshman in high school, my friend. I was quite distressed. But you're a nice guy. I know
now
you're
I'm
nice.
I'm gonna have to go through my DMs.
Oh my God!
We need the evidence.
You get to send me a screenshot. I'm gonna need the receipts.
He thought it was just some old guy that was lost.
I probably blocked you just on the fact that you were a Raiders fan.
That could happen too.
See now the reason comes out. Now the reason comes. No, Tom is.
Yeah,
good
you
people.
and Raider Cody hanging out.
But again, no, seriously, I'm not lying on that one. That's not a joke. I actually reached out to you, and the amount of crickets that came out, and what's the other little bug that comes out like every 7 years that makes a lot of noise? That's all I heard.
Cicadas.
Cicadas. Thank you. Go. Yeah. And again, I appreciate Tom being here. I appreciate Tom Jones being here. I appreciate the Bronco gentleman,
Cam
Ryan?
Parker.
Was it Ryan? I
Cam
messed up.
Parker.
There you
Peter
go.
Parker.
Cameron Parker.
He
Yeah.
looked like a
Peter
Ryan.
Parker.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, he looked like a Ryan. And then, of course, I got to give props to Senor Snappy. First off, can you stand up and show that wonderful apron? Because, again, I won't stand up and show my ass again, but I'd love to see your apron, sir.
Oh,
Now, there you go.
Very kind of you to ask. Yeah, this is my brand, Rivers Lake Yacht Club, and since we're doing shout outs to our own podcasts and whatnot, Rivers Lake is it's a site we mostly are publishing blogs, but we're starting to work a little bit with the Bolt Bros, who I think are on this podcast a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of filling in for those guys. Bolt Bros, let's go. But riverslake.org, got lots of cool stuff on there. Our take is we're a little bit more punk rock end of the Chargers fan base, and I think you'll like it. Come check us out.
All right.
So as an interesting piece, punk was my genre and still is, frankly. I haven't broadcast
did
that.
you wear Janko jeans? You did.
No, I didn't.
You had them. Come on.
Nope. No, in Canada, Janko jeans came really late, and then I thought they looked stupid. And that just wasn't my thing. I was also of a slightly older generation, which looked at those as being ridiculous. But in terms of punk and everything like that, I was more of like an Op Ivy, Rancid type of guy in terms of that genre, to kind of give context to those who may actually recognize those bands. But honestly, I think this roundtable has gone really, really well, considering you had 8 guys all in one podcast, which is rather remarkable that we actually had a cordial conversation, especially considering we were all rivals. But when you look back at everything here, we all have our own questions. We all have our own, items that we want to bring forward with regards to our own teams. Senor, is there a specific way that people can find you and your podcast, since you've stuck with us to the end? I like to make sure people can kind of reach out to you directly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just ask everybody to go to riverslake.org, and it's easy to find all our stuff if you go to that website. So please check us out there, riverslake.org. And if you want to know where the name comes from, we named the lake in front of SoFi Stadium after Phillip Rivers. So that's where Rivers Lake comes from. So,
I knew it had to be something about Phillip Rivers in there.
Yeah. So if you ever feel like NFL's getting too corporate for you, just know that you can name stuff and they can't do a thing about it. So that's my tip for you. It's my gift to all the AFC West fans that are listening right now.
Well, Senor, on the benefit, Phillip Rivers did in fact have enough kids to repopulate a full lake.
So people say that if
on
the positive side there, it's rather
you're snapping on the stuff that I was going to use as a joke. I said he has his own army of people for that, plus he probably adopts as well, so all the ones that he makes and adopts, it's not a family, it's a small village. Actually, it's a big village.
Well, here I thought, Captain, you were going to go all the way there and say that his school of fish are clearly swimming well.
That's exactly where I thought.
Who am I to make?
Shame on you, Cap, for missing that line. Shame on you.
Right there, teed up.
Yeah, the thing about his sperm, though, if you're talking about his sperm, right?
Oh Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about jizz. Well, his swimmers are known to swim in a slightly cocked angle, not a true, classic direction. That's what he's famous for. But
I agree.
All's well that ends well, right?
I agree. The swimming.
We were doing so well.
I know, Tom. We were completely left, and I don't know how we got here.
I'm just trying to answer the question.
The swimming motion and throwing motion are equally as odd.
It wasn't me tonight. So hey, it wasn't me.
It was kind of like indirectly, you though.
Other than
Hey,
You
right.
never trust the guy wearing an apron. You don't know what I'm trying to protect.
Ew. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I am Richie Ritchie of the MHRT Network. You can find us on YouTube and all the various things. If you like to support this podcast, we have a store down below where you can buy all the AFC West, Wild West podcast gear in terms of hats and T-shirts and all that good stuff. That helps keep the show going and all that good stuff. With regards to everything else, we try to bring you interesting guests like all the ones we've had tonight to make really great content on your favorite four, AFC West teams. And this really is a rather unique podcast. I've only ever known of two that have covered the entirety of the division. One is the NFC East, and the other one is the AFC West. I don't know of any others that cover the entire division like ours does. It really does set us apart, in my opinion. With regards to all of our guests, including Cam, who you have aptly pointed out, who has now had to duck out, we did tell you that he had another podcast, his own, called Mainly Broncos, that he had to jump off to earlier in the podcast. For all of our guests, Arrowhead Tom, Senior Snappy, and all of those who joined us today, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And until next week, where we bring you more AFC West content in terms of all four teams, all of the different things and how we all integrate together. We will see you next side, where the West side is the best side. Peace!
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Yeah! Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, go.